example, build something as a female founder, build something in this region, it's hard, right? And there's odds stacked and stacked and stacked.
They had the thought, I'm not going to invest in her because she is a woman. You've had the umpteenth meeting where you've been rejected by investors. You think you've got to a point where the money's coming in. There are points where you're like, I'm exhausted. I can feel every single part of me is tired. I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. Yeah. I would have to physically collapse. Why am I doing this to myself? Like, you get one life. Women's health is my obsession. Blessed every day to have found this obsession because I think this is what I was made to do.
Yeah.
This is what I was born to do.
Welcome back to the Well on Our Way podcast, where today my guest is Sophie Smith, the founder of Nabta Health, the region's leading and most innovative female health company. Enjoy the show. Sophie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile last night, as you do, casually. And what I didn't realize was that Nabta is not your first stint in business.
That's correct.
Not your first gig. So tell me, one, about that journey, like from, your first entrepreneurial experience all the way through to today. But as you tell me, talk me through kind of what gave you that bug in the first place. Like, it takes a special, very special kind of person to do what you do and what we do. What made you that special person?
That is a question that did not start when I started working. I think the interesting thing for me was moving away from expectations that society and my family had for me in general and figuring out what I actually wanted to do and then really running with it.
What were those expectations?
The only expectation I still think that my family had for me growing up is that I would be a mother. And at some point, that's what from maybe the age of 3 or 4, I wanted to be a mother and I wanted to be a writer. Like, I started writing my own books and signing them written and illustrated by Sophie Newman Sanders, which is my maiden name, from about the age of 3 or 4. I still have some of them in my parents' house. But ever since I was tiny, I was someone who made things. I used to make, again, when I was very little, giant castles out of paper. But not just like, I would do turrets, I would cut out windows, I would do floors, I would do rooms with doors and furniture entirely from paper and then cardboard and then felt and whatever I could kind of get my hands on. I come from a family of engineers and doctors. And I still maintain that because I am a girl, at no point, my father actively discouraged me from going into medicine, but at no point did anyone say to me, hey, Sophie, you like building stuff. Have you thought about being an engineer? And I went to a school that was not very strong in the sciences, but was very strong in the humanities, and ended up reading at university the subject that I was best at and probably had the most scope to engage with at school, which was history. So I read history at university, but despite the fact that in general I have a good head for numbers and the things that I'm interested in I can hold on to and rarely forget, I couldn't engage effectively with history, like the kind of facts around events and things. I would just forget, they wouldn't stick. And I remember being perturbed by this because history was something that I thought I enjoyed and was good at. And then when I was at university, I started dating and in fact became engaged to a guy I didn't end up marrying, who was a fellow in computer science. And he built one of the first artificially intelligent systems for spoken dialogue management. And when I was dating him, I ended up spending a lot of time in the engineering department reading his thesis, helping to train his machine. This machine that he bought and set of algorithms went on to become a company called Vocal IQ that was acquired by Apple for £100 million in 2015. But at that time, I learned to program in Python, which was in its very early infancy then, in Visual Basic. And I took a job when I graduated as a technology consultant with Accenture, which I would still say at that point was aligned to the expectations that my family had about academic and career progression up until the point where I became a mother. And the whole time I was at Accenture, I fought against the fact that although you have tremendous learning opportunities within businesses like that, your learning curve is very dictated. You get promoted within this period. You have to hit these milestones. Like, the career progression is, out of necessity, fairly uniform for everyone. And whenever I tried to think outside the box with anything, I would usually be very severely reprimanded. For example, I was working on a project doing a big VoIP migration to VoIP for an international bank. And we had about 12,000 sites within this site list that I managed that we were writing circuit order forms for. Mm-hmm. And there was a team in India that had been established sort of with a business case for 3 months just to fill in these order forms. And I wrote a macro in Visual Basic that I ran, and it auto-populated all of these order forms from the site list in 24 hours. And I thought, well, now they can do other things. Yeah, but I had ruined the business case for this team, not understanding that if you completely undermine the business case for part of the team, it then causes the company to call into question the business case for all other teams.
Entirety.
Yeah. So I was really hauled over the coals for that one. I actually ended up leaving Accenture after about 3.5 years, fed up of having my learning curve dictated to me to set up my own business. And I didn't know what I wanted to build. I just knew that I wanted to build something. And I would say all of the businesses that I had before Nabta, and I ended up having 4 and 3 years, very different, all kind of in the like tech space. But one was a software development company in the UK. One was a software development company in Pakistan. We built a doctor finding appointment booking platform there. One was a plastic recycling company in Sierra Leone. That it was about finding the thing that I really wanted to build. And I remember in the early days, I didn't even fully comprehend what that meant. With the very first company that I had, we went to Web Summit in 2014, and it was I pitched what was a bit like a kind of metaverse experience for like career progression. So instead of applying for jobs in a very traditional submit your CV, maybe do some work experience way, we wanted to create this metaverse where you could interact in environment to get a feel for what that job might look like. Yeah. And I pitched it to this investor at a kind of event we went to after the summit on one day. And I was halfway through and he said, "Let me stop you there." He said, "I don't know what you're going to end up doing with your life. I'm sure whatever it is, you'll be very successful in it, but this is not it." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Kind of affronted by it. Yeah. He said, "This is not it because you do not want it enough." I never met the guy before. He didn't know me from Adam. And I was kind of like, "What do you mean I don't want it enough?" And this stuck with me for years. So I was like, "Well, I want a family. I want to have children. I don't want to wait until after I've had children to do whatever it is I'm meant to be doing from a professional perspective. I want to, does that mean I'm never going to want a business enough?" And then actually when I founded Nabta, and about 6 months into Nabta, where it became clear that women's health is my obsession, and I feel blessed every day to have found this obsession, because I think people can go their whole lives trying to figure out what they're meant to do, what they were put on this earth to do. And I feel like in women's health, I found that. But about 6 months in, I remember thinking back to this conversation with this investor and going, okay, I understand now what he meant. When he said you don't want it enough, he meant that in the quiet moments where you are in the shower or you're driving between places, or you could be thinking about anything, or it's 6 o'clock in the morning and you've been up all night with a screaming baby and you have to get up and you have to fly to Saudi for a meeting, when everything or nothing requires you to think about this business, you're still thinking about it. After you've pitched it 10,000 times, you can still pitch it with the same enthusiasm and interest that you did the first time. That's when you want it enough. And that's why I've ended up here after this slightly winding journey with Nabta. And that's also why I hope this is where I'll be for the next 30 years.
I think that this is the point of this show, right? Is to talk about journeys that are absolutely non-linear, right? They go
absolutely
round
non-linear.
And round and up and down and down and down and down and
down and down.
We've been talking about this earlier today, and there really are incredible highs, but there really are significant lows that last for prolonged periods of time. And this is really what I want to do here, is kind of like shed the light on that, because Instagram does a great job of showing the glitz and the glamorous side of entrepreneurship. And I still question how real a lot of those businesses really are. And LinkedIn also does a great job. And I'm a big advocate, a big user of LinkedIn. I know you are too. of being more vocal, as real as you can be, but then no one really wants to hear about when you're feeling down, right?
No.
Or when something's gone wrong, or when a supplier has let you down, or when the app has broken. Like, no one really wants to hear that. But all of those things have an impact on you. And I think whilst you can be obsessed, and we are obsessed, I know you're obsessed with Nabta, and that's one of the things I admire about you is both your obsession with building Nabta, but also your principles. And obviously from a very early age, those principles were developed. And I think a lot of people don't find their obsession, but also a lot of people don't develop those principles. And you've got quite a unique blend in that respect, which is why we always have very interesting conversations. So you mentioned your father, who kind of actively discouraged you from medicine, I think you said. What impact did your parents or your family have on you growing up? And did any of that play a significant part in where you're at today, do you think?
So I still think, my family is the single greatest gift I've been given, and the single greatest privilege. I appreciate, I am very privileged in many senses of the word, but the fact that we had a very strong nuclear family growing up, my parents obviously had their differences from time to time, but they're very close. I'm the oldest of 8 siblings. As siblings, we are very close. We were kind of in a funny place where in many ways, my father, until not many years ago, was the National Clinical Director of Diagnostics for the NHS, so one of the most senior people in diagnostics in the UK, very senior in medicine, radiologist by background. We should have been probably very well off, but we weren't, because we were a family of 10. And we people kind of didn't know what to make of us, because on the one hand, we were very well educated. 5 of the 8 of us ended up going to either Oxford or Cambridge. But, we didn't go on big, glitzy family holidays. We went to the same little village in the north of Spain every year, where we hung out with lots of other families, with lots of other children. And we had, kind of mucking around, very community-oriented, very family-oriented holidays. Besides that importance of family, that real security net that family gives you, which I think is something that is inherent within the Middle East as well. And one of the reasons why I felt like I potentially belonged here more than I've ever done in the UK when I moved here. Yeah. It was that curiosity. My parents, and particularly my mother, nurtured in us a curiosity. They always say that children are born inherently curious, asking why. Perhaps the best thing that you can do as a parent is to feed it. As long as children remain curious, they become adults who learn. As long as at no point that curiosity is sort of stamped out, they become adults who love learning. And I think that inherent curiosity is a fundamental part actually of most entrepreneurs. There's this acknowledgement that we're building things, but we know very little about the world and how it works. And we're taking a sort of set of ideas and we're putting them together in the hope that perhaps we can have an impact and we can improve the way that part of the world functions. But there is for me anyway, there's a distinct curiosity and an open-mindedness. I know that there are lots of things about what we're building that I don't know. And maybe at some point it will become apparent that what we think is, the perfect product with the perfect product market fit will end up not delivering the outcomes that we expect, and then we'll change it. But I want to find out, So I think the security net of the family and the open-mindedness that comes with a strongly nurtured curiosity are 2 things that my very, very important things my family gave me.
So you moved to Dubai in
2016.
2016.
Working since 2011.
What brought you to Dubai?
My husband. And he got a 3-month kind of temporary stint with Dubai International Financial Center. He's a barrister. And then with Altamimi. And at the end of the 3 months, got a job offer. We were newly married. I was pregnant. I just set up this business in Sierra Leone, but it's 24 hours one way from here to Sierra Leone. Not an easy thing to do, heavily pregnant or with a new baby. So I said, I have to do something here. We ended up kind of permanently moving out here in the January of 2017, even though then around the time that Oliver was born, I went back to the UK for 4 weeks and then kind of came back out here. But from January, I was actively looking to do something here. A couple of months ago met my now founding investor at a conference on diabetes in Kuwait, where we got chatting, not about the fact that, about diabetes, but about the fact that I was pregnant. And in November, December time, he'd sent me a bunch of stats in women's health in the region and said, do you want to do something in women's health together? And I was in the Impact Hub. I remember the old Impact Hub in Souk al-Baha, reading through this deck of statistics. Second or third slide, I was like, this is it. So from kind of back end of 2016, 2017, Nabta started to be thought about. And then we officially started working on Nabta the day my son was due, 21st of March, 2017.
Second child?
First child.
First child, okay.
Unless you count Nabta as the first child, in which case he was the second child.
And you've gone on to have a few more since.
Yes.
So you're a mother of four?
Four,
yeah.
Correct.
Eldest is?
Eldest is 7.
And the youngest?
7, 5, 3, 1.
Wow. I think we just let that sink in for everyone listening for a moment. So yeah, again, that's another one of the things I admire about you, is that you know, attack motherhood in the same way as you attack business, with that no set, you know, not in the typical fashion, let's put it that way. You don't accept what other people do or say is the right way, and you do it your way, and you don't let other people tell you otherwise. And I think that's admirable. And above all else, it's really, really hard.
It is really hard. And I think it has been a natural inclination of mine to move, to work, to do, you know. But if you are surrounded by people who are differently inclined, then the fact of you continuously being on the move, having more energy than you know what to do with, is hard, actually. For me, I find the more intense things are at Nabta, and I'm very compartmentalized. Like I take the children to school at 8:30 in the morning, all 4 now. The youngest is in nursery. I work 8:30 until either 3:30 or 4:30 when I pick them up. And then I'm with them unless something exceptional happens, or as I was yesterday, I'm out of the country for a day or so. I'm with them until they go to bed. And then usually I have an exhausted 30 minutes where I consider all of my life choices. And then by sort of 7:38, I pick myself back up again and I go back out and I go to the mall or I go to meetings and I work until 11 or midnight. So sleep is something that is a perpetual challenge for me, acknowledging that it is it's extremely important, but trying to make sure that I set aside enough time for it and also allow myself to wind down enough to actually get good sleep is something I struggle with. But yeah, the compartmentalization of it works for me. For other people, it wouldn't work. The intensity of it also works for me, but again, everybody's different. For other people, it wouldn't work so well. And, you know, in terms of my closest relationships, whether it's with my family or my husband, even my children are all similarly wired. They've all got a huge amount of energy, but it can be difficult. Yeah.
I think that's the point. This is the purpose of the discussion, is to not mask it, right? And I think we were talking before we started around sleep. Obviously, I wear WOOW and you wear a Huawei tracker. So talk to me a little bit more about sleep, because it is a little bit ironic that, you know, the leader of a health business or the leader of a wellness business doesn't get enough sleep. And
sleep is, as in of all the things that you can do to improve your health and your outlook and your cortisol levels, and in fact all your hormone levels, even ahead of hydration and what you eat and how you move, it's sleep. Sleep is when your body recovers. Sleep is when you process and lock away or you know, do all the essential things with the chemicals in your body and the thoughts in your head. Sleep really is important. The reason I got the Huawei, and I only got it a year ago, around the time that I did the women's run for the first time, was because I wanted to move from reliably having 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night to 6 to 8. I acknowledged that moving from 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 was going to be a bit of a leap, but I wanted to try and land within the 6 to 8 as much as possible. And probably an indication of how well that's going is that last night I got, but I did one of my 24-hour wake up at 3 a.m., fly to Saudi, have meetings the whole day, get back at 3 a.m., this morning days, but like 4 hours, 43 minutes of sleep last night, and probably just under 4 hours the night before. So like I have had in 2 nights the sleep you should have in 1.
Yeah.
And that will impact everything. One bad night of sleep, like one night of sleep that is around the 4-hour mark, can damage your T-cell antibody generating abilities. You know, the impact that it has on your immune system is significant. I know this. Gary, you're
Hence
sitting
the irony.
there.
I'm sitting here smiling.
Sitting there smiling, thinking, well, this is deeply, deeply ironic.
Well, you said it, not me. So
Yeah, I did. But it's one of these, you know, everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. Getting enough sleep reliably, especially because I don't necessarily feel it, you know?
Yeah.
Like it can take weeks of poor sleep for it to
catch
actually manifest itself as a sense of I'm not getting enough sleep or falling ill.
Yeah.
So it's something that I have to process logically. I have to rationalize it. It's not felt. And that obviously makes it harder.
And I think, you know, I was saying I was the same. So since, you know, wearing WOOW for the last 18 months, it's really reprogrammed my attitude, I guess, towards sleep, because my attitude used to be, well, I'll sleep when I'm really tired, or I'll sleep when I'm dead. Yeah. Right. And it was, and I used to say it out loud. Now, when I say it out loud, or I see people saying it, I'm like, oh, your logic is fundamentally flawed.
Yeah.
And again, you're an incredibly intelligent person. You work in the health space, you know, but like you said, there's something that still tells you deep within you, your mind or your body, that actually I can get on without 8 hours sleep. I can get on with 4 or 5, but eventually it catches up with you.
It does catch up
and
with
I think
you.
this is about the, you know, one very good and probably the best example of sacrifice that has to be made to build something in this region for you. And I mean this in, you know, the most honest and, you know, the best way possible. Build something as a female founder, right? It's hard, right? And there's odds stacked and stacked and stacked. And like you said, you need sleep to be at your best. But if the more you sleep, the less time you have to build and work against the odds that are stacked against you. So something tells you, I'll be all right. And for the most part, you probably are all right, but you probably aren't at your best.
But you aren't. And
at some point it catches up with you. And when it catches up with you, my goodness, it catches up with you.
Yeah. So it caught up with me in May, June last year. I had 9 viruses in 7 weeks, like back to back. Yeah. I just went one into the other, into the other, into the other. Really interesting from a health perspective, because they all manifested differently, all viral, no bacterial, slightly different symptoms, and my immune system was just shot.
Yeah.
We were coming up to the close of a big ticket as part of our current funding round, but you know, the amount of time and energy it was taking me to manage stakeholder expectations, do everything from an investor relationship management perspective, just keeping all the pieces together, like it really took it out of me. Yeah, it does. I mean, the body keeps score. And I used to say the same thing to myself. I'll sleep when I'm dead, but actually I don't want to be dead in the next 10 years.
No, or 20.
Or 20 or 30.
Yeah.
And if you wish to continue falling asleep at night for a long, long period of time, investing in that sleep now is important. You know, they talk about preventative care being essential, but it's difficult. And even if you find parts of it easy, like diet, for example, some people really struggle with diet. Some people, it's just, it's natural, it's intuitive. Maybe you've been brought up that way and you just don't lean towards these, towards fast foods and things that other people have been brought up on. And so moving away from them is harder, but there's always something that you will find challenging.
Yeah.
And for me, it's getting enough sleep.
Yeah. I think everyone, like I say, everyone struggles with something, and even the highest performers, you know, will have their weak spots. But again, you know, the focus of this show is really on entrepreneurs and founders and builders. And I do feel from experience that you have to sacrifice possibly more than others, or possibly more than others will ever know. And whether that's sleep, whether that's, like you say, nutrition. I've always struggled actually with not eating enough, right? Because you just so in the zone. You just want to work. And then it's like, oh, wow, it's been 8 hours and I haven't eaten anything.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at drinking water, thank goodness, because otherwise I'd either be dead because of lack of sleep or lack of nutrition or lack of hydration. So yeah, I think it is incredibly difficult to continue to prioritize that preventative care. And like I said, eventually it catches up with you. And And the amount of times that I've caught, whether it's sickness bugs or had like killer migraines, I'm just like, I know why this is. I've only got myself to blame. And again, over the years, both with experience and with, wearing WOOW, wow, how my attitude and my mindset has changed, and now it's sleep, good nutrition, good hydration as the absolute foundation of every day. And often, from time to time, we get it wrong. But again, I think it's the conscious effort that you have to make to rewire your gut feeling to just say, no, I'll keep going. And like I said, for you, I have 2 young boys, as you know, you have 4 young children, makes it even like infinitely harder.
The amount of discipline that's required is extreme. I mean, and it's interesting, isn't it? Like, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of us become what we become because actually we don't like rules. We don't like operating within set frameworks. And then you build a business and probably you have to become the most disciplined and the most willing to operate within certain frameworks than you've ever been in your life. And you could argue that at least those are of your own making. And maybe that's why they sit a little better with you. But it's a funny juxtaposition, isn't it? That, there's a perception that entrepreneurs are free. If there are entrepreneurs that are free, that comes after years and at a point where the business is sustainable and probably not reliant on you. Like probably you become free when you aren't so much of an active entrepreneur anymore. Yeah. In terms of all the kind of metrics of freedom that people would typically think about.
So on the point of freedom, let's talk about the opposite. Let's talk about feeling trapped. I think one of the biggest challenges for me over the last 2 or 3 years has been going through investment rounds and the impact and the toll it has on your every aspect of your well-being, actually. The pitching to US investors at 11, 12 o'clock at night, then not being able to sleep because the adrenaline is flowing, maybe not working out as much as you want to, not eating as well as you should, the impact on your mental well-being, the stress, and also the impact it has on your relationships, the amount of good time you can spend with your partners or your friends or your kids.
Drastically reduced.
To the point it almost being non-existent. I remember long periods of time feeling completely unpresent with, my wife and kids. You're just consumed, right? Like I said, trapped with this, I must get this thing done, which is raise capital. I consulted, our collective friend ChatGPT last night on the percentage of female venture funding in the region. So there may be a rounding error here or be completely wrong, but it's around 1%, right? Around 1% of venture dollars in this region go to female founders.
It's actually lower than that. So it was higher.
Yeah.
4 years ago, it was 2.2%, 1.9% in 2021, 3% in 2022, 0.47% last year. Down to 0.2% in the first half of 2024. And in July, it was 0.01%.
Yeah, I guess my point being is the only point lower it can go is to nothing, right? Which is, I can't fathom it as a male founder. And I'm sure, you have plenty of things to say as a female founder. I don't really want to go too much into that. But what I do want to go into is how has, you've raised money. So you have done something that in July, only 0.1% of other female, and you probably are the 0.1% perhaps of female founders that have raised money. How has that process of raising capital impacted you? Because you ultimately raise money generally for everybody else. I think people have this misconception that you're raising money, and then oh God, you must be wealthy and rich and you've made it. Oh, I hate to tell you that that's not the case, right? And you're generally raising money for others, right? And, to pay staff, to buy new clinics or fit outs or whatever, equipment, whatever. How has the most recent process, let's go right now, how has the most recent process impacted you as a person? How long has it lasted? Tell us about the journey, because unless we talk about it more, others won't know what to do, and that 0.1% won't become any higher any sooner. I know there's other factors, right? There's the external factors, right? But as a female founder, or just as a founder in general, how has the process impacted you as a person?
Boy, That is a loaded question.
Take a deep breath.
So we are partway through a pre-series A of $7.5 million. We have closed two currently, closing in on the final 5.5 from one big institutional investor, inshallah, by the end of the year. But the first $1 million check that we ever had came in as $1 million check in July. And
so July of this year.
July of this year.
And when did you start the process?
We started the process of raising this round the previous June 1st, after the annual general meeting. But already at that point, we were in catch-up mode. So, the first 500,000 we had in from angel investors kind of came in and went out. And then we had a period of a good 6 months where we weren't paying a lot of the team. And we've been through these periods before. We went through one during COVID, 9 months. We needed to open around March 2020, tried for like 3 months. It was obvious it wasn't going to happen. Put everything, like the fundraising on hold, started officially raising. That was our seed round, March 2021. And we closed it February 2022. But, when you set up to start a business, all you see is the rounds that are being closed. As I would say, as a female founder, you don't compute in the first instance. The most of the founding teams you see are male. And then after a while and however many investment conversations, you realize that there's a lot of conscious bias. You're getting a lot of questions that pertain to you being a woman. Perhaps my favorite ever was when I was raising our seed, I was 38 weeks pregnant with, which baby would have been? Baby number 3. One investor said, Sophie, Nabta is clearly is a company with huge growth potential. You clearly have other growth priorities. How can I be certain that you're the person to run this business? But you get a lot of unconscious bias as well. And the unconscious bias is the thing that it's really difficult to work with, because people will swear and will take it to their kind of deathbed that they do not discriminate against you because you are a woman. And that is because at no point have they had the thought, I'm not going to invest in her because she is a woman. But that's conscious bias. Unconscious bias is thinking everything that you would naturally think about a business you don't want to invest in. The financial projections are too ambitious, the valuation is too high, the total addressable market is too small, the traction is too little, but you think it 10 times more for a female founded business, and you don't understand that you're doing it because in your head, all of these are logical objections, but it happens anyway. And that's why, even though somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of all businesses in MENA are founded by women, for the latest Flat 6 Labs Organon accelerator, for example, they had over 500 women's health technology applicants.
Wow.
500 femtech businesses applying for a MENA-based accelerator. Do you see 500 femtech businesses receiving funding in the region? No. In last year, it was $19 million out of a total of almost 900 million. That was the 0.47%. In the UAE, it was actually lower, 0.34%. There was a period in our fundraising journey where this made me angry because I don't like injustice. Wired against it, I would say. And it struck me as deeply unjust that I could be presenting a business with the same presentation, probably with a much more comprehensive virtual data room, with the same product offering in the same market, and still attract significantly less funding than a male counterpart might. And then I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to work with the statistics. I believe in numbers. I understand them. And unlike humans, they don't have additional layers of complexity. So I was like, if the statistical likelihood of me securing investment is this, and I went with the standard, which is 1 in 17 investors, then I'm not going to even think about my odds until or get cross about anything or feel frustrated about anything until I've spoken to 17 investors. So for our now 68 angel investors who've invested in Nabta across 3 funding rounds, the latter 2 through special purpose vehicles, I reckon I've spoken to now over 850 funding bodies, be they individuals or institutions.
So you've dodged the question a little bit here. So well done. How did it make you feel? So you said angry. So how did it impact you? So thank you for the statistic, because thank you for correcting me, because they are like disgusting. I think that's probably the only word I can use to describe it. Like, I know how good you are. I know how I can imagine how good those 500 femtech businesses could be, but any technology business needs to be funded, needs to be support, and actually not just funding. I think beyond funding, it's the support, it's the introduction to ecosystems, to commercial partners, to growth, whatever, good hires, whatever it might be, good mentors. So the stats are disgusting. You said it made you feel angry at one point, and then you said, no, I'm not going to feel angry until I've spoken to 17, which you did. And I think, again, that kind of is a great testament to your personality and your character, the character that you were from a very young age, from the building castles. But how did it make you feel? Like, what are the kind of emotions that you've gone through on that journey, from June 2023, I think when you said June 1st, 2023 to today is October 2024, that's a long period of time. And you said that staff weren't paid, and this is what I say about when you raise money, you don't raise money for yourself. You are the last beneficiary.
I took my first ever salary with Nabta in July this year, 7.5 years in. So 7.5 years, I didn't take a salary at all. And it got to a point where, again, talking about privilege, I was able, not without significant sacrifice with my husband's salary, to not take a salary for that long. But it got to a point where 4 children and school fees and living costs in Dubai spiraling, that I simply could not afford to not take a salary anymore. If I hadn't taken a salary, we wouldn't have been able to send our children to school, or we'd have had to have moved out of our house. Like, that's the point it got to in September this year. How did it make me feel? You talked about feeling trapped. And it's a funny thing because you have, again, a strong sense of obligation to everybody who's backed and believed in you. Mm-hmm. You have a strong sense of obligation to this business that you are certain is meant to be. I had other companies, and I had one company that I liquidated. And I know what a failing business feels like. And I know what a business that requires just a little bit of support to give others a little bit of time to catch up with it also feels like, And for Nabta, it has always been Nabta's time. The realization of that, the ability for it to do what it needs to do, has taken longer than I anticipated. And the extent to which you're trapped is different. Like, I'm not physically stuck in a room. I'm also so committed to this company and to our vision for women's health. And it's so much now a part of me, this desire to eradicate bias, be it gender or racial, in healthcare. Mm-hmm. I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. Yeah. I would have to physically collapse. And I've had this conversation with myself, because you get to a point where you're like, you've had the umpteenth meeting where you've been rejected by investors. You think you've got to a point where the money's coming in. The money, like, even the deal's been signed, and you still have to chase it and chase it and chase it and chase it and chase it to actually get the money in the bank, by which point you immediately need to go and raise more money again. And there are points where you're like, I'm exhausted. I can feel every single part of me is tired. My belief in the world, not even in your own abilities or the business that you're building, but my belief in the world and its ability to see the impact this could have, is kind of at an ebb, where you lose faith in the world a little bit. Yeah. You lose faith in people and the people whose decision-making abilities and capital you're ultimately reliant on to facilitate the building of this business. And then you go, just, why am I doing this to myself? Like, you get one life. And increasingly, as you add investors to your cap table, your shares in the company also come down and come down and come down. And there's a point where you're like, I'm fighting, as you said, to raise money for people that are not me. My family are not the immediate beneficiaries either. And I have 4 children who are also my concern. The amount of this business that I actually own is getting smaller and smaller. And there are moments where you're like, why? But I think that's, again, why, if you are a business that is wired for impact and has a very strong kind of mission and vision, you come through these moments whenever they occur, and you reorient yourself around the objective and why you set out to do the thing in the first place. But that also means that, again, you're trapped. You couldn't stop me. You couldn't stop me working on Nabta. And that's also a weird realization to come to. Like, I would have to not wake up in the morning. or I would have to wake up in an environment where I couldn't physically operate, separated from the people I work with and from my tools in order to not work on it. Even then I'd be thinking about it. You're trapped.
Yeah. So what's got you through those, those troughs, those darkest, deepest moments of anger, frustration?
Sleep, Gary.
Sleep, yeah.
Sleep.
4 hours of sleep has sorted you out?
No, not 4 hours of sleep. But
or who's got you through? What has kind of enabled you to kind of say, right, yeah, pick myself up, dust myself off, I'll go again, I'll speak to the 851st investor. Because I haven't figured it out myself, by the way. So I'm asking a question that I don't know the answer to,
so I think
for full disclosure.
Yeah, so that for various reasons, at some point in my life, probably 18 months ago, I came to the very firm conclusion that I am my own pillar of strength. And you can lean on different people for different things. And you will. And you will have friends who you reliably talk to about specific things, and people within your inner circle, outer circle that you go to for advice, but you are your own pillar of strength. And it can be a scary thing to realize that ultimately the reason you get up, the reason you get through these troughs is you. Like, it's nobody else. And there's no point trying to, you can try and ask why and figure it out and try and come to a conclusion that there's someone somewhere else that could be doing this job for you, but it's not. It's you.
Yep.
And that's very empowering. But it can also be disempowering, because there can be moments where you feel depleted and you're like, who's going to get me out of this mess? Oh, it's me again.
Yeah.
And that's why I say sleep. There's nothing that with a good amount of rest doesn't look better in the naked light of the next day. And so when I start to feel like I get to that point where within the entrepreneurial journey, you feel like you're trapped, or that this path that you have chosen, that has chosen you, is kind of inescapable, and maybe that's not a good thing, I just go to sleep. And I've not once woken up and been in that same headspace.
Yeah, not felt better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think often the best remedies are the free ones, right? Sleep, go for a walk.
Go for a walk. Walking is amazing. A bit of movement, it's incredible what sedentary lifestyle does to you in terms of, again, just even things like lymphatic drainage. Everything stops moving. Movement helps everything.
Yeah, movement and sleep.
Movement and sleep.
Obviously, look, you're now looking to close the round. How do you, in sports terms or athletic terms, we're kind of going into the final phase of the game, or into injury time, if you will, particularly with a round that's lasted 15 months or 16 months.
Still going to be the round we've closed the fastest, by the way.
Well, yeah. So you've effectively run like 2 or 3 ultra marathons at this point. How do you kind of get yourself over the line, physically, mentally, and then once you're over the line, how are you able to carry on? Because I think that's kind of like the analogy I will use, is that raising money is like running an ultra marathon, right? It is a long-lasting endurance sport, physically, mentally. But then when you're over the line and you've raised money, that's when you actually have to then start putting it to work. You haven't got time for recovery. You haven't got time to go on holiday and say, put my feet up. That's the last thing that you'll have time to do. So how do you now get yourself through that last phase? Because it's the critical one, and it's the bit where you have to be at your best, yet you've just endured a 15, 16 month ultramarathon. So how do you kind of now navigate that last kind of very important part of the journey?
I think in this context, you say to yourself, I am an ultra marathon runner. Like, this is what I was made to do.
Yeah.
This is what I was born to do. I'm going to finish this race, and then I'm going to run another one. And maybe it's not what I envisaged for myself growing up. Maybe I've kind of found myself doing this accidentally. Maybe I don't always like it, a lot of the time. Maybe I even resent it because I can see that life could be easier, and maybe I'd have a little bit less heartbreak and sacrifice fewer friendships and spend more quality time with friends and family. But if you're an ultra marathon runner, you're an ultra marathon runner.
Yeah.
And that's just what you do.
Yeah. I suppose you have to be mentally preparing yourself for the next race before you finish the current race.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
I think, again, you can, and we discussed this before as well, there's part of you that's like, I'll hit this milestone and then I'll have enough traction, we'll have enough revenues, we'll have enough proof that the thing that we're building deserves to go the distance, and the next round will be easier. I've had that conversation with myself so many times. The next round will be easier.
Yeah.
And it's not.
No.
And it's something I think that as a new entrepreneur, you're not aware of, that you're going to spend a significant percentage of your journey fundraising, not building the business that you thought you'd be building.
Yeah.
But raising money to support it. If there's a degree of tech enablement, if there's a requirement to build before you sell, if you have kind of a significant growth trajectory that you're pursuing that takes you outside the realms of organic growth, then you are going to be continuously fundraising. And so, do yourself a favor, and every time your brain tells you it's going to be easier, just say no, it's not. But that's okay, because we did it before. We have coping mechanisms. We can do it again.
Yeah, I think you build a level of resilience that you would never quite believe was capable of building, right? That even, I know myself, I've always kind of backed myself in most scenarios, but I never knew I had the level of resilience that I have, having gone through multiple funding journeys and building a business at the same time. Let's look forward, right? What's you close around, that's all done. Let's just imagine that all goes plain sailing the next, few weeks or months, whatever it takes. What will make you happiest looking, at the end of 2025, looking back, what will have made you happy or fulfilled in the post pre-Series A journey?
I think that's probably a question that as an entrepreneur you shouldn't be answering. I think, again, while look backs and this was a great moment, this was a great achievement, are important, and it's important to recognize how far you've come. If you don't get satisfaction, and if you aren't able to seize those tiny moments of joy as they come, and if you can't get to the end of the year and maybe not qualify or quantify the sense of satisfaction, then perhaps you're setting yourself up for unhappiness, because the highs are so high and the lows are so low, And sometimes I think your greatest achievements are not the things that appear in press releases or in LinkedIn or Instagram stories, but they are those tiny, unquantifiable moments of joy where you'll make a connection with somebody or in your head about a thing, or you'll see a member of your team do something that they never thought. And I feel like those are always my greatest moments of happiness, actually.
Yeah.
And they're the things that aren't recorded. They'll never be recorded for posterity. And so I try to process them as I go. So if by the end of the year, we're still building Nabta's on a path to sustainability, financial and otherwise, perhaps it's a little less dependent on me. Succession planning was a big part of our sort of strategy as a board this past year, to identify somebody who could be a good successor, a CEO, if anything ever happened to me, and having the business be able to stand on its own 2 feet and go the distance regardless. That is an achievement. That means that it's pursuing its purpose with or without you.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think again, we're immensely privileged, whether we feel trapped or otherwise, being wired the way that we are to build what we build and do what we do. It's an extraordinary gift. I wouldn't change it.
No, I completely agree. And I think you have to train yourself, I think, to acknowledge and appreciate the smaller moments rather than continually chase the big ones, because that is a trap you can fall into, raising investment rounds or press releases or the big things. In the end, for me, 9 times out of 10 haven't actually made me any happier.
No,
they certainly don't make me sad, but they don't give me that sense of joy or fulfillment that I thought they would have done in the first place. They're like, I've just spent 2 years raising an investment round and I feel flat. Like, what happened? That wasn't in the script. So you do have to take the smaller moments, like you said, the people you meet, you connect with, and appreciate them. And going back to what we talked about a lot, is if you're in a position where you can have a good night's sleep, then you're in a good spot.
Yeah.
So I think, that's been a real focus for me over the last couple of years, is how can I set myself up to have a good day rather than try and chase a good day. And I think that's been a real transition. So yeah, and very, finally, you talked about transition or succession planning. Sorry, what else excites you about 2025 for Nabta? Let's talk a little bit about that for a couple of minutes.
I think growth. It's been we were the first women's health technology company in the Arab world. There really wasn't a huge amount of conversation had around women's health when we founded the company. We've thoroughly enjoyed, alongside our own journey, seeding the ecosystem. There's more and more of that happening. We were just part of the founding team that hosted the inaugural GCC Menopause Summit on World Menopause Day at the Museum of the Future.
Looked incredible, by the way.
To all intents and purposes, it was a great success. A lot of interesting conversations had. We've always believed that the GCC has the potential to become the global hub of innovation in women's health because of its investment into medical facilities, because of its innovation mindset, because it's such a melting pot in terms of nationalities, backgrounds, appetite, growth, So I'm excited to see that kind of vision come to fruition as well.
Yeah.
I was just in Saudi yesterday, officially signing an MOU with Princess Noor University to open the first Women's Health Research and Development Institute in the Middle East. That will be officially up and running and sort of taking applications for grant funding from the start of 2025. So, again, our mission as Nabta is to empower women in the Middle East and Africa to effectively manage their health. Our vision is to eliminate the systemic gender and racial biases that we see in healthcare. I'm excited to be able to continue working in this space and maybe getting a little bit closer to realizing those two things.
Sophie, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. We've obviously known each other for a while. We've kind of followed similar paths. Our paths have crossed, and then we've probably disappeared out of each other's universes for months at a time. But then we seem to cross paths again because we're still here. And
part of the cockroach club.
Exactly. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you were the first person to call me a cockroach, and that will stay with me for the rest of my life. So thank you. But no, it's been a real pleasure and a privilege actually to sit down and talk like this for the first time ever. And we should definitely do it more often.
Do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. But obviously, incredibly, it's satisfying, I guess, to watch your journey from the outside, to see, how you stand up for what you believe in, your principles, the values, the business that you're building, right? And, as we've talked about, in an environment where the odds are stacked against you. And I don't think we should have, dodged that. And I certainly didn't want to avoid it. And I want to kind of attack it head on. But yeah, it's fantastic to see your journey, and I wish you the very best of luck for the close of the round, and look forward to seeing what 2025 brings for Nabta.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for having me.